Good morning. So today we have Cody with us, who is an additive manufacturing industry professional with experience in strategy, investor relations, executive training, crisis management, coaching, and a lot of other roles. Let's welcome Cody on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, who will tell us about his experience, where he's currently working, and the things that he's learned, which would be useful for people that are seeking jobs at the moment. Hi, Cody. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Of course. How's your day going so far? What have you been up to?
It's a bit crazy. We're printing some shoes for a fashion show in Milan in a couple weeks.
Oh,
The fun thing about the 3D printing industry is you never know what customers are going to want. So it's always something different.
oh, that sounds fun. Especially, can you name the company specifically, or is that a secret so far?
Honestly, it's a designer's name that I can't pronounce. I think it's Italian, so I'm not even gonna, I'm not even
Okay.
going to attempt.
Sounds good. So, Cody, can you tell us about where you're currently working, what the company specifically does, and what your role is within the company?
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of Print Parts Inc., and we're a 3D printing and additive manufacturing service provider. We're located in the middle of Manhattan, and we've been in business for about 3 years as a company. I came on as a co-founder a little over a year ago, actually right before COVID hit and shut down everything. So it was a bit of rough timing on my part to come and start a new startup.
And do you think, as in like with the pandemic and everything, has the growth been stagnant, or do you think the business has been growing over time?
So we actually made a very successful sort of pivot early on. Normally, we provide services to companies like auto industry, defense contractors, aerospace, making production parts for them on 3D printers. But we actually ended up working with the New York City government and became the prime contractor for COVID response. And so we set up a whole new office, hired a whole new team of people to print the nasal testing swabs for COVID response. And so we did over 1.5 million COVID swabs over the course of last summer, really. So for us, a lot of companies struggled during the pandemic, but to be honest, we've really thrived during the pandemic, mostly because 3D printing managed to really jump in and fill some supply chain needs.
That
During
sounds
that situation.
wonderful. So your company was definitely a part of overcoming the pandemic and was a part in playing as a catalyst to make sure that we can find the pandemic. So that sounds absolutely amazing. So you mentioned that you hired a team and you opened up a new office during the pandemic. How was the hiring like specifically during the pandemic? Because I think before, like, the norm was to call people in for interviews and everything, and then you used to set up Zoom interviews. How was hiring like during the pandemic specifically?
Well, for us, it was a little unique because there's not very many people that have the specific skill sets that we were looking for, which is the ability to operate 3D printers. We're also running it's a heavily FDA regulated industry, so the medical device space. So we had some pretty strict requirements. So we actually just reached out to our network. The 3D printing community is very small, even in a place like New York, and so everybody kind of knows each other. So we were able to pull in some really great team members just through our network.
Okay. And do you think, as in like, if for example there wasn't like you guys didn't have that network specifically, what are some challenges according to you, specifically because you're a co-founder, you know the ins and outs in the market, hiring market specifically? What are some common challenges that companies face, specifically when they're looking into a niche industry of hiring people that require certain characteristics or certain skills?
Yeah, so location is one, obviously. So in the case of the swab operation that we spun up, we needed people, physically here, right? Because we were working, pretty much every day all summer till like 3 a.m. Like we joked it was swab farming. So we just, it was a factory operation, right? So we needed people here. We hired another team member who's our chief product officer for some technology product we're working on. He's remote, and so he's in Portland, Oregon. We found him through our network as well. But that's been a whole nother set of challenges, right? Is we only met him for the first time in person last week, right? So we worked with him for over 9 months, almost a year actually, fully remote, with that, never having actually met him in person. So that was a bit of an adjustment. Obviously, that's not the way we would normally have done things. It's worked out, but it's definitely been there's been some challenges there.
Of course. And specifically because you worked for a person over a year and then you see that person in real life and you're like, oh, you're real. I've actually worked with you. So I think that
Mhm.
that itself is very interesting and like just amazing, because at
It was
first
very
it's
strange
couldn't.
seeing him in person. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that.
Yeah.
So, is your company specifically hiring now? What kind of roles are you looking for? What kind of characteristics are you into specifically? Because if people do reach out to and your company absolutely sounds amazing, what would be something that you would be like, oh, this is a person that I would want to be a part of my team specifically?
Yeah, so the people we did hire, we hired a bunch of lab technicians, we hired a logistics operator, we hired a chief of marketing, a chief product officer. Our next phase of hiring will probably be towards the end of the year, and we'll be looking to add a bunch of people to support our new product launches. So that'll be additive manufacturing, specific applications engineers, front end developers, customer support specialists. So we're looking to hire probably, I'd say, about 10 people over the next year. That's kind of our target right now.
Okay, 10's a good number specifically because I mean, a lot of companies even shut down. So you're continuously still hiring and
Hmm.
looking to hire, which is something that's very important.
Yes,
So
correct.
you mentioned specifically that you're hiring these specific roles, but what kind of characteristics or what kind of skills would you look for in a person that would want to be a part of your company specifically?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's the skills to do the job, right? I mean, they need to
Of
obviously have the
course.
relevant work experience for those specific roles. But specifically because we're such a small and young company and a startup, culture is incredibly important. When you're a small organization, just people have a disproportionate impact on the organization, right? And that can be a plus or a negative. So if they're a high performer, if they work well with everybody, if they're aligned culturally, that they're kind of worth almost double, triple their weight, right? But the flip side is true, right? So we have to be, the sort of mantra in the startup world is, you hire slow and you fire fast, right? Because someone can be very disruptive if they're not a good fit, and so that's a responsibility of myself and my co-founder. We have to be very deliberate with the hires we make beyond the skill sets that they might have, but we have to think about the whole team, and we have to think about how dynamic and kind of chaotic a startup can be, and you need people who can thrive in that environment.
Okay, true. It's like a jigsaw, right? You need to find the right pieces to fit together as a team, specifically
Hmm.
because you're a startup, because
Right.
it's important for you to find the right people that can get along with each other to come up with the most efficient work. So I can definitely see that. So, last question,
Hmm.
Cody. If there is one piece of advice that you have for people that are seeking jobs, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so a few things. I think the most important thing you can do, and I've gone through many periods of unemployment myself, and transitioned from being a professional chef for about 12 years into
Oh,
the
wow.
technology field, which is a real struggle. And I think you have to, I read a lot, so there's some great books out there I recommend, like "So Good They Can't Ignore You" by Carl Newport. That's a fantastic book. And you really need to kind of figure out what are you actually good at, and that's your career capital, right? And that's what you need to market yourself as. I also highly recommend people to lean on their networks. If everybody is applying through jobs, by the time a job hits like a job site, it's just too late. Like, in my opinion, you're wasting your time, right? You need to go where other people aren't going, which is through mainly through networking. And so you really have to make an effort to get out there, be on LinkedIn, be proud of your accomplishments, help other people, and then people will pay that forward. In networking terms, I think that's the most important thing people can do.
That's very true. That's very true. Well, Corey, thank you so much. I hope, as in, like, it was definitely a pleasure learning from you about your company, which is doing amazing. And I hope the fashion show works out well for you, specifically in Milan. And it was a pleasure having you as a guest. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Of course.